138 MMA here to break down the most exciting fight card of the year, at least to date. UFC 281. I was pretty excited about UFC 280. UFC 281 has a lot more depth to it, I do believe. And man, is this an exciting fight card. I'm going to go ahead and kind of give you a warning here. I'm picking way more underdogs in this one than I like to say. I'm kind of nervous about it. Looking at this card, I will say that I'm going to kind of do the let's cast a wide net on these underdogs here, and if around half of them hit, I feel pretty good. And if around, 3/4 of them miss, it's not so good for me. So we're gonna check this out. There's a couple I'm passing on the dogs. I'm not picking dogs all the way through, but I do like a lot of underdogs in this card, so there's that. Also, if you haven't checked out the early preview I did of this main event on this card, Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya, if you haven't checked that out, me and my guy, Brandon Beast Mode Meyer, making his BKFC debut on November 18th, we broke down that fight just a little bit with his perspective coming from the fighter. We're kind of going back and forth. We talk about BKFC, we talk about that main event of this card, but him and I, we kind of got that back and forth going a little bit. If you haven't checked out that video, check it out. I'll make sure that it shows up at the end screen of this video. But before I waste any more of your time, let's get into that first fight after this.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, 138 MMA proudly brings to you the hottest picks in the world!
Hey, the first fight of the night. Here it is. We have Carlos Ulberg taking on Nicolae Negumereanu. I think that's how you say that. Anyway, we're going to call him Nicolae for this one. Both guys coming in 4-1 in their last 5 fights. We have an interesting height and reach discrepancy here, whereas Ulberg on one side is 6'4" with a 77-inch reach, which I gave him the plus there as the advantage because he is 6'4". We have Nicolae over there, 6 foot with a 78-inch reach. So technically the 1-inch reach advantage on the Nicolae side. However, for Carlos here, Carlos is 6'4". Now, what does that mean if we have a 6-footer with a longer reach? What that means is he probably has the wider shoulders, because your reach, if you don't know, is your arms out to the side. I can't really do that. I got a wall here. It's your arms out to the side and it's across, right? It's not how far you can reach ahead of you, in front of you. So what that means to me is that he's got a bigger frame, wider shoulder set, okay? The 6'4" Ulberg here, he's going to be taller, probably has the longer legs. His arms, if you're measuring them from the front of the shoulder reaching forward, are most likely longer. So I've given him the plus there. I explained that for you because, if you wanted to say, well, he's got the longer reach. Yeah, he does, but he's also 4 inches shorter. There you go. Anyway, in this matchup, we kind of have an interesting look because Ulberg is clearly the better striker. Much higher level in kickboxing. He throws in combination when he strikes, which is ideal, obviously. I mean, he has decent takedown defense should it come to that. So on the other side, Nicolae, he can get wild at times. He has decent striking. It's not terrible, but he can get wild at times in the striking. And the problem is if he wants to do that here, he's going to lose because Ulberg is the better striker by a lot. However, Nicolae does have good wrestling. Can he get the takedown? Yeah, maybe, but also, like I said, pretty good takedown defense over here. Decent anyway. Maybe he doesn't. But what he doesn't need is a full takedown to control this fight. What we can see here is Nicolae gets the cage push, gets the clinch, works those type of things in, and controls minutes and can work some damaging shots from there against the bigger Ulberg here. Now, if Ulberg's pushed up against the cage, that reach and height advantage is pretty much negated, and Nicolae can actually put his head into the chest of Ulberg, be able to use that to make it hard to be hit with any power, because, you're punching over like this, trying to hit down at him, whatever, while he works in some trips, gets him down, lets him get back up, whatever, because Ulberg could get back up. But Nicolae here, if he can keep this in the clinch or against the cage for a lot of the fight, he can win a lot of minutes that way. Who do I think wins this fight in a striking match, though? Ulberg's going to definitely win that in a striking match. So here's what it's going to come down to, and I'll give you my pick in just a second. It's going to come down to whether Nicolae can close the distance, keep Ulberg pushed up against the cage, or even clinched in the open. That's a lot harder to do in MMA than it is in something like Muay Thai, where both guys are okay to stay in the clinch. But in an MMA fight where the threat of the takedown is a very real thing, especially when you're one guy that does not want to get taken down, it's going to be tougher, but he could, clinch him up anywhere. Can he get the takedown? Yes, and if he does and he can stay on him and win minutes, he has that option. For Ulberg, the striking advantage is huge. Now, here's the thing that kind of led me to my pick. Do I think Ulberg's going to knock out Nicolae easily or with the first big shot he lands? No, I don't. So, even though I think Ulberg's going to be able to be the better striker and land a lot more damaging shots, I don't think he can do it for 3 rounds. I think 2, maybe the first round, yes. I think Nicolae is going to come on by the next couple of rounds, be able to control minutes and land some of his own damaging shots in those minutes. Maybe get a takedown probably in the 3rd at that point. Second round, probably a lot of cage pushing. I'm getting really specific on this pick, so don't take that much to heart. I think he's going to use the wrestling to control more of the fight is what I'm really getting at. He won't be completely lost in his striking, especially because the threat of that wrestling is there. So even though his striking is not as good, when you have a guy worried about the takedown, that striking opens up. So for me, I'm going to ever so slightly, just a little bit lean on the Nicolae side because I do think that grapplers tend to beat strikers. So there you go. Going Nicolae on this one. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I do like Ulberg. I do think he's got a really good upside here. I just think Nicolae is going to be able to control more of the fight and probably edge out a very close decision as he's done in the past. Let me know what you think. This next matchup here is one of the hardest ones for me to predict on this entire card, and I'll tell you why. We've got Montel Jackson coming in 4-1 in his last 5 fights, taking on Julio Arce, 3-2 in his last 5. Now this matchup is interesting for me because here's what we have. We have a 5'10", 75.5-inch reach for Jackson, which is massive compared to the 5'7", 70-inch reach on the Arce side. Now for Arce, that's a 5.5-inch reach disadvantage there. For Jackson, that is a big advantage because he's a guy who uses that range striking very well. Montel Jackson is sometimes he'll give away minutes waiting for strikes to open up or for shots to open up, but he does strike well at range, and I do think that this matchup, Arce is going to give him the ability to do that because, well, we'll get into it a little bit more, but sometimes Arce fights a little bit defensively. So for this one, for Montel Jackson, he does have good offensive wrestling as well as grappling, but defensively, it's not his best skill set. I don't think he has to worry too much because, like I said, Arce is going to fight defensively, and the power of Jackson is there. He can flatten you with a shot, and he keeps the ability to do that throughout the fight because he doesn't overexert. He keeps himself at kind of a level pace throughout a fight, and that's why he's very consistent through the rounds. But that can hurt him against a guy like Arce, who will turn up the volume when he strikes in combination, but he also does that off the counter. So Montel Jackson comes in, throws his rangy 1-2s or whatever. Jackson comes in. Arce might throw 3 or 4 punches or kicks or elbows or whatever because he's gonna mix it up well. He's gonna mix up his striking from the elbows, knees, obviously punches, kicks, whatever. He's gonna mix that stuff up. So when Jackson comes in with the 1-2, Arce might throw 3, 4, 5 different shots at Jackson. Might not land all of them, but the volume is there on the counters. And that's something I do like about Arce. And I will say I've switched my pick on this fight multiple times already, which is why I'm just leaving this one as is. This is a kick your feet up on the coffee table, crack open a couple of cold root beers, let this one be, because for me, I can't stick with a pick long enough to make a pick from a betting standpoint. I will make a pick for this video because that's what I do. If I didn't, that would just I would just might as well not even put this part in there. But anyway, so earlier tonight, I was leaving the gym. I was, on my way home. I'm sitting there. I'm, listening to some interviews on my drive home, thinking about okay, where am I at on this one? How do I feel? I'm leaning Arce. I think the counter striking, the combinations, his ability to mix things up. Okay, I'm leaning Arce. I get home. I sit down. I'm eating some dinner, and I'm listening to some more interviews, getting ready to do this. I'm sitting there and I'm not even listening to these interviews aren't even about this fight particularly. They're just about the card in general with just from various different sources. Okay, some people that are hyping it up, a couple more some fighters on the card, I did listen to an interview with Dan Hooker. Obviously, we'll cover that later. But anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, I don't like fighters that I don't like, isn't it? I don't like the style of waiting for your opponent to dictate what happens. And because of that, I switched my pick again. So I'm back on Montel Jackson. Because I think the problem is Julio Arce, if he's going to let Jackson dictate the pace, he's going to have to deal with that power coming down range at him throughout this whole fight. And I think that it won't take too much for Jackson to be able to land one or two that maybe rattles Arce. And if he rattles Arce, we've seen it recently, the judges are scoring mostly off of damage. I mean, that's what the scoring criteria has always said, but a lot of times that's not how the judges actually scored things. Lately, they've been really scoring on the damage side. Now, if Montel Jackson drops Julio Arce 2-3 times in this fight, whether he wins on strike numbers, takedowns, whatever, I could see the fight going to him, or he could put him out. I mean, he does have power. I'm on Jackson right now, so my pick's going to be Jackson. I'm just leaving this fight off. I can't handle it. I don't have a clue. I mean, this one, to me, this one's a coin flip. And for a coin flip, if you're taking the Arce side because he's the underdog, I don't blame you for a bit, but I'm just not gonna place anything on it because I'll probably place a bet and then I'll regret it and want to switch my pick and then I'll say, well, I'm not gonna cash out because blah 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 blah. Whatever. You don't need to hear about it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you more confident in this fight than I am? Because I have no clue where I am on this fight. And I'm okay admitting that because I do have some confident picks later in the card. But let me know what you think. We've got more to get to. All right, so we have Mike Trizano taking on Seung Choi. Both guys looking to get a win here because both guys not looking too great in their last couple of fights. Seung Choi 3-2 in his last 5. For Trizano, 2-3 in his last 5. Now in this one, there's a slight height and reach advantage on the Seung Choi side. He is 6 foot with a 74.5-inch reach. We have 5'11 and a 71-inch reach on the Trizano side. I don't think that's a big enough discrepancy with the style that these guys fight in. That's going to be a big issue, but I'll make note of it because it is a thing. So in this fight, we have the all-offense Seung Choi. He's going to come forward. He's going to be able to use his striking. He's powerful. He's accurate. Doesn't really block a whole lot of shots or get out of the way of them, so he'll eat shots as he comes in. Doesn't really care, but he throws power. He can wrestle offensively as well. Defensively, not so much. He gets taken down sometimes. His takedown defense isn't absolutely terrible, but it's kind of lacking because he's all offense all the time. And he can wrestle offensively. I didn't write it up here, but he can. He seems to me like he wants to knock you out most of the time. He will go for a takedown here and there, but he's got the power. He's got the accuracy. It's basically just offense, no defense. 100%. Okay? Seung Choi, easy to break down in that sense. Trizano, on the other hand, this is the trickier part. Here's where we're at. So, the guy was solid boxing, solid wrestling. He's good offensively and defensively, but he's not as good offensively as Seung Choi. Makes sense. This guy's pretty much all offense, so of course he'd be good at it. But he does have some defense, so that's nice. Something that I like about Trizano is that he is consistent throughout the fight. Rarely do you see him just kind of completely change midway through a fight and fall off a cliff. He's sticking with what he's got, what he's doing. He can pick it up and do something better, but he's going to be consistent in the fact that you're not going to see him just kind of just go. You're not going to see him fall off a cliff cardio-wise. He can get tired. It's a fight. You can get tired, don't get me wrong. But you're not going to see him fall off a cliff cardio-wise. You're also not going to see him fall off a cliff in the fact that if he is using something to success, he's not going to just stop using it like you see some fighters do. So for example, if Trizano's winning in the boxing realm of this fight, if he's landing shots well, you're not going to see him all of a sudden come out in the second or third round and just not use his boxing. If you see him use some wrestling early on, he's been able to take Seung Choi down, get the top control or whatever, you're not going to see him just forget about that later in the fight. That's not how he's fought, at least up to this point. So I do like that about Trizano. One thing I also noted about Trizano is that he knows when he's losing a fight, and he will turn it up a bit in order to seek a finish and try to get the win. Whether it works for him or not, okay, sometimes it doesn't. But he knows when he's losing a fight, and he's a fighter. Something I like about that, he's a fighter that will. He understands that losing by decision and losing by getting knocked out because you're trying to get a victory is the same thing on paper. You still lost, so you might as well go for it and go for the win. And now I understand the damage to the body, whatever the career. Strictly for the record standpoint, if you lose by decision or lose by knockout, it's the same damn thing. So for me, I do like that about Trizano. For Choi, what I like is that he is all offense. Defensive fighters, anybody that's watched these videos, I tend to favor the offensive fighter over the defensive fighter because you just don't win on defense. It's the same with anything. If say you're playing some sort of sports ball, you don't win on defense because you have to score points, right? Okay, it's the same in a fight. You can't win. You can win by blocking stuff. We've seen it with people getting their leg broken because the other guy blocked a kick. Not my point. My point is, typically you're going to win on offense. So a guy that's all offense, I'm okay with that. So I do like that out of Seung Choi. The thing is, he's almost too all offense because he just doesn't block anything. He'll just keep swinging back, which I like and dislike at the same time. In a fight with Trizano, though, I'm going to slightly edge Trizano. The reason why is I think he can... I shouldn't be confident in Trizano to be able to mix in the wrestling and the boxing together in this matchup and maybe keep the takedowns as the option to open up the hands and go back to the wrestling because the hands are landing. He can switch to the wrestling. I shouldn't be confident in Trizano to do that, and I'm not. I'm not going to place a big bet on this fight. But as an underdog, I think there are enough paths to victory for Trizano that I can feel all right putting a very, very, very small wager on Trizano. And because of that, I'm going to pick Trizano in this fight. He might come up on the other side of a knockout and not look too good and then get cut. But I think he also realizes that he's fighting for his job here, being 2-3 in his last 5, coming off, I believe, 2 fights in a row that he has lost. Yeah, I think he's going to come out here and he's going to look to play a smart strategy in this. He's going to look to get the win in any way he can. And I think he's going to really take the time to actually implement that strategy, not just go out there and have fun. So I think he is going to mix in the boxing and the wrestling to keep Choi guessing, and I think he's going to be able to get this win. So for me, I'm taking Mike Trizano here. Not the most confident of my picks, but I don't mind him as a dog. Let me know what you guys think. He's also it's almost a hometown fight for him, so I guess there's that too. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let's move on to the next fight. For this matchup here, we have Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Silvana Juarez. Both ladies are 37 years old. For me, that's kind of a red flag typically. But since they're both 37, it's kind of a wash. So for Kowalkiewicz, she's coming in 1-4 in her last 5 fights. That one win is over Felice Herrig, who did retire. Yeah, I mean, she beat a retiring Felice Herrig. That's not the best win. She has a lot of losses. On the other side, we got 3-2 for Juarez. Also not the best record, but it's at least a winning record. Neither of these gals are probably going to move on to title contention at any point in the near future. So we're going to break down this fight simply for this fight and not anything that they could do in the future, as I normally do in a fight. But you got to bear with me when I say certain things. I'm only exclusively talking about this fight. So, for example, decent Muay Thai. Now, I don't think that she can compete with some of the ladies in the division that have good Muay Thai. But at this stage in her career, in this matchup, her Muay Thai is a decent option for her, and she does have the better volume in this fight. So for Kowalkiewicz, decent Muay Thai, better volume probably than Juarez. But for Juarez, she has decent boxing. The power in her hands, it's real. We saw it in her last fight. Flatlining, folks. Here we go. She also has hand speed. She has she has quick hands. Obviously, a KO comes from a couple of different things. It could just be a power in the hands, but also that speed is what really gets you because it's the punch you don't see coming that puts you out. I'm sure you've all heard that before. It's true. It's the real truth, okay? So with good hand speed and some decent power in the shots, Juarez she is able to make up for her lack of a well-rounded game with her boxing, especially at this division, fighting other ladies at the bottom of the division, okay? And I don't think it's crazy for me to say that a girl 1-4 in her last 5 is at the bottom of the division right now. Anyway, in this matchup, I will say Kowalkiewicz does have the better grappling between the two, but I do think this ends up being a striking fight. So I didn't really write it up here. If I did, it was just to write up something else on the board, and I didn't think you needed that. For me, I'm going to look like a total dummy being wrong in this one, if I am wrong in this one, but I'm pretty big on the Silvana Gomez Juarez side. And the reason why Kowalkiewicz beat Felice Herrig, but Felice Herrig, she's always been just kind of like all right. And she was at the end of her career. That fight she didn't just completely wash her, okay? For Gomez Juarez, she looked really good in her last fight with that power. I think that carries over to this fight because it wasn't that long ago. So for me, I think Gomez Juarez should be able to get the knockout here or at least win a very convincing decision by landing some really hard shots. If this does go to the ground, because say Gomez Juarez drops Kowalkiewicz, if she gets on top, I don't think she's just going to be absolutely done the second she gets on top. But I would like to see her just stay standing and bring this fight back to the feet because I think on the feet, Gomez Juarez has the best path to victory. The Muay Thai is solid on the other side in this matchup. She can use those kicks to actually kind of bridge the gap in the striking, but I think the hands are going to be too much for Kowalkiewicz, especially as the fight drags on, where kicks start to become less frequent in a long, drawn-out fight. I don't think we actually get a long, drawn-out fight, but if we did, kicks usually tend to start to drop in volume, whereas punches usually end up taking the forefront because it's easier to throw a punch than it is a kick. If you don't believe me, throw 100 kicks and throw 100 punches, see which one takes less effort. You'll figure it out. But anyway, Gomez Juarez is the pick. Let me know what you guys think. Let's go to the next one. Now we have Matt Frevola taking on Ottman Azaitar. For Azaitar, he's 5-0 in his last 5 fights because he's 13-0 overall, so he's undefeated. So, yeah, no losses. On the other side, Matt Frevola, 3-2 in his last 5. Some of those losses haven't looked so good because he's been flatlined, and that's not what you like to see going up against a guy with such big power on the Azaitar side. Azaitar does hit like a truck. We've seen it in, well, a lot of his 13 fights. He can drop you. The problem is he hadn't fought in a long time. So for Azaitar, he has a big long layoff, I think 2 years, and I do believe this was the last matchup that he was scheduled for in the UFC, but if you remember 2020, there was all those weird things with the word you can't really say on YouTube. So Fight Island, that's where they were at, in the like weird tent thing or whatever. The potato incident. He had somebody trying to climb through the rafters and sneak in a bag of potatoes, apparently. I don't think it was potatoes, but maybe it was. Maybe it was potatoes. Maybe the guy really likes potatoes. I don't know. Could have been something else. Maybe he's on the sauce. And if he's on the sauce, well, then I'm definitely taking that guy. You know what I mean? But anyway, so that was an interesting thing. He has not fought in 2 years. This was the last matchup he was scheduled for. In that time, Matt Frevola's had not the best run. I mean, he looked good in some matchups and horrible in others. I mean, Terrence McKinney was able to destroy him. That's okay. Terrence McKinney's kind of a beast, so there's no big deal there. But because of that McKinney fight, you see how somebody with that big power and aggressive style that Azaitar does possess can do some serious damage to a guy like Matt Frevola. On the other hand, if Matt Frevola is able to implement his game, that good wrestling, good grappling, be able to control with volume and pressure on the feet to set up that grappling and wrestling, yeah, Matt Frevola's got a really good shot at beating a guy who maybe 2 years ago I thought for sure was going to win the fight. However, we do have the chin concerns because Frevola has been knocked out in both of those losses, I do believe. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves correctly when I was looking at this earlier, those 2 losses are both by knockout or TKO or knockout. I think they're both knockout. I believe he's been out in both. Anyway, the cardio, the volume, and the wrestling and grappling, all in favor of Frevola. There is some good takedown defense on his Azaitar side. Here's the problem, though. If Frevola doesn't get that takedown early, it only takes one big shot from a guy like Azaitar, who is 13-0 for a reason, to take out a guy who has the skills, but just the durability isn't there. I don't think Frevola is totally made of glass, but I think a guy that hits like Azaitar does probably has a pretty good shot here. And as an underdog, last I saw, he was even money, but you could have gotten him not that long ago at plus 105, plus 110, something like that. Azaitar's the pick, and if this was 2 years ago, it would be a very easy pick for me to make. I don't know what's happened in that layoff. It's been 2 years. He hasn't fought at all. Didn't fight in the regional scene. I do believe he was cut from the UFC, but didn't fight. I assume he's been training because it'd be stupid if he wasn't. So I assume he's been training. So that does give me a little bit of hesitation, but I do like the Azaitar side here. If the odds flip totally and Frevola ends up being a pretty decent dog, or even a moderate underdog, I might just even it out, call it a day, take the free money. You know, can't go. I mean, free money's the way. Free money's great. So I might just take that. Then I can sit back and watch this one with my root beers, call it a day. But for me, if I'm making a pick, I'm going to take Azaitar. Let me know what you guys think. You think Frevola can out-wrestle him and use that to win the fight? If so, let me know. Or if you think he's going to outstrike him, which I don't think is going to happen, but let me know. And let's move on to the next one. Quick, couple seconds. There is going to be a week where we don't have UFC or Bellator fights. It's, I think the week around Thanksgiving or whatever. I'm going to put out some sort of content. I have a couple of ideas. Let me know what you guys want to see in the comments below this video. I'm thinking maybe I do an interview with another fighter, maybe talk about more of their career, maybe we talk about an upcoming fight, something like that. Interview with a fighter, professional fighter, obviously MMA probably, maybe a BKFC fighter. I do know a lot of both, so maybe that's an option. Or I might give you my list of my, say, top 5 favorite fighters currently in the UFC, or, you know, something like, or favorite fighters to watch or whatever, something like that. Let me know what you guys want to see on that off week for I believe it's the week after Thanksgiving or weekend of Thanksgiving or whatever. Let me know what you guys want to see, but let's get into this fight because we have it already up on the board. So we have Wellington Turman taking on Andre Petroski. Petroski's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He fought a bunch of bums, but he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. We got 3-2 on the Turman side. You know, the guy looked like he was going to be something coming into the UFC, but he's also come up short quite a bit. Had some good moments, had some rough moments. All right, so we've got an interesting fight here. How I see this one. Good wrestling, good grappling on the Petroski side. Obviously, the guy was able to submit Nick Maximov. Nick Maximov is no longer with the UFC. I thought Maximov was a bunch of hype. I did not think he was very good coming into any of this. I didn't pick Nick Maximov in this fight. I didn't in the fight with Petroski. I didn't pick him in his last fight. I don't think Nick Maximov was as good as everybody thought he was. Sorry if you're a big Nick Maximov fan. Anyway, Andre Petroski. I don't think he's as good as anybody thinks he is either. I think the guy, he's also really unlikable, so it's really hard for me to say good things about him, but I'm going to because there are some good things. But Petroski, real unlikable guy, but he does have really good wrestling and good grappling, okay? We've seen it. He's done a lot of grappling competitions, or not, I mean, a lot, but he does have some grappling competitions outside of the UFC that he's been able to do and do well in. So we know the grappling is there. It helps that he's a very strong, powerful individual, as you see here. That doesn't just mean in the striking realm of a fight. It also means with the grappling, he's able to use the muscle to kind of muscle his way into positions that he may not be able to get just with technique alone. His technique is good, but he's able to use that muscle to get in there as well. Now, it's going to be interesting against a guy like Wellington Turman, his jiu-jitsu is really solid. It's, jiu-jitsu guys do tend to struggle with really high-level wrestlers, but Turman's got some slick jiu-jitsu, and he locked up that armbar against Serkinov. It was quick. Now, I don't think very highly of Serkinov. He's kind of aged himself out. He hasn't looked that very good, whatever. I'm pretty sure he's got cut too. So there you go. Both guys winning over guys getting cut. But that his jiu-jitsu is there. It's a real talent that he has. He's good with it. And he's good with his cage grappling as well. I don't want to leave that out. So it's not like all the grappling is on the Petroski side. Turman has it, but in a different way. The cage grappling or clinch work, but specifically against the cage, is on the Turman side. I do think if it goes up against the cage, it's going to be Turman. If it's on the ground, we have an interesting matchup where if Petroski's on top, he's probably going to be winning. If Turman's on top, he's probably going to be winning, which is usually the way it works in grappling. However, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that you see from Turman does pose a threat even from the bottom, whereas Petroski doesn't have a big threat off his back. So I will say, in the grappling, once it is on the mat, Turman's the more dangerous, but controlling the fight, Petroski has the better way to do that. On the striking, neither guy is very good at striking, okay? Petroski does have power, so if he lands, there's that. But he doesn't throw a lot of volume. It's not very pretty when he does strike. He's been able to, hit some guys, but they're pretty low level. I mean, he fought Michael Gilmore. As much of a likable guy as Michael Gilmore was coming in on The Ultimate Fighter as like the guy who saved it all, he saved the show, like, coming in there doing the damn thing. We wanted to root for Michael Gilmore. Dana White liked Michael Gilmore. He just isn't of the UFC level. Okay, great, we got that. On the other side, Turman, his striking is just not that good. He's a UFC fighter, so his striking's better than total trash, but it's not very good. He can get hit quite a bit. His offensive striking is like all right, but realistically, both of these guys are going to want to implement their grappling, and that's where we're at. The cardio issue on Petroski's side. Now, this became a big issue in the Bryan Battle fight, if you remember, on The Ultimate Fighter. Bryan Battle was able to beat Petroski because Battle's got great cardio. Petroski started to fall off a cliff. When that happens, when Petroski gets tired, he can be taken out of the fight because cardio, the whole cardio makes a coward out of everyone thing. It's real, but it also takes away your durability because when you get hit and you're exhausted, falling down is pretty easy. I don't know how many people watching this video have ever been at the state where you're totally exhausted and also getting hit. If you have, you understand that, yeah, it's not a flattering trait to have, but a lot of people are going to drop when they're getting hit and they're exhausted. So for Petroski, he can get finished in that time. In the grappling department, I do think his cardio is better because he knows how to control himself, but he can gas out his muscles late in a fight if he's trying to muscle too many things. And against a guy like Turman, who has really slick grappling as well, that is going to be tough not to try to do. If he's just using his technique, Petroski can maintain in the grappling, but if he has to muscle some things, which he will probably have to do against a guy who is so strong on the ground, Turman's not a weak guy either, so don't get me wrong there. I think that we're going to see a little bit of a grappling edge on the Turman side as the fight goes on. So for me, with Turman being an underdog and how unlikable Petroski is as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to take a shot on Turman. Small shot, don't get me wrong. He's a big underdog for a reason. But I don't think Petroski's all that good. I do think Turman's actually improving as he's been fighting in the UFC. I think Petroski's beating a lot of bums. I'm not saying Nick Maximov's a bum. I just don't think he's all that great. I would say Turman's better. I would pick Wellington Turman over Nick Maximov as well. So there's that. Let me know what you guys think. I know this is probably a controversial pick because a lot of people do like Petroski. Don't know why. A lot of people don't like Turman. I totally understand why because he's not really likable either, but whatever. I'm taking Turman. Let's go to the next fight. We've talked about this one way too much. Here we've got a fight I probably spent way too much time breaking down and going over. So we have Meatball Molly McCann, 3-2 in her last 5 fights. Last couple of wins have both been by spinning elbow KO. For Erin Blanchfield, she's coming in 5-0. She in her last 5, she's the highest kind of touted prospect in the division, I would say, at this current point. This matchup's a very interesting one for me because I do think both ladies, with a win here, can find themselves getting propelled to the top of the division without any trouble because there will be a lot of eyes on this matchup as it's obviously on a big pay-per-view. And also, both of these ladies do have some decent wins already on their records. So for this matchup here, we do have a 6-inch reach advantage on the Blanchfield side. And the reason that's interesting is because 6 inches is half a foot, so that's a big reach advantage, but they're the same height. So McCann's just got short arms. That's the way it is. So for Molly McCann, she doesn't really kick a lot, but she has really good boxing and really strong power. And by really good boxing, I mean like it's pretty good boxing. It's not like a pretty boxing style. It's not bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's ugly, but it's more of that like kind of rugged, powerful boxing style. She will throw the elbows as well, which of course isn't boxing, but you know what I mean. She's got good hands. She's got good power, and that's really, really interesting, and that's a good thing for her in this matchup. On the other side, Blanchfield, she has okay striking. She will use her striking to set up the grappling. She's more of the kicker at the striking range, which if she has a 6-inch reach advantage in the hands, she might be able to use that a little bit to hit McCann before McCann can get in, while McCann, who does have good forward pressure, is trying to press things forward and press the pace. The kicks are going to be obviously even more range than the punches, so I do think Blanchfield is going to be able to hit McCann before McCann can hit Blanchfield. However, McCann's striking offense is going to be the more damaging strikes, so is it going to be who can hit first? Is it going to be the damage? We'll find that out as we go on, or especially on Saturday when the fights happen. In this matchup, though, something that's interesting is Blanchfield can fight from either stance. She'll switch a lot, actually, and she'll throw kicks from either stance more than the punches, but she can throw from either stance. But she does get countered sometimes, and that's how when I put here where she can be hit, it's typically in the counters. So whether she throws a kick, gets countered with the hands, that's something that I can see McCann taking advantage of and really hurting Blanchfield here. For Blanchfield, being able to fight in either stance, being able to kick from either side, even though she can get hit, she does have a big enough reach advantage in this matchup that she might be able to get out of the way and avoid some of those counter strikes from McCann. So there are some decent things in the striking that go for both of these ladies. But here's the biggest X factor on the Blanchfield side. She has really high level wrestling and grappling overall. And in fact, that's what she's been able to use to get most of her wins in the UFC. She out-wrestled Miranda Maverick pretty much that entire fight. And Miranda Maverick just had a pretty darn good wrestling showcase, I guess, against Shayna Young just last Saturday. Sure, Shayna Young's not that highly respected of a prospect or anything like that, but I will say Blanchfield being able to out-wrestle Miranda Maverick as easily as she did in that matchup, that does give credit to the wrestling and grappling skills of Blanchfield. So for me, Blanchfield has the high upside on the grappling side. For McCann, coming forward like she does, she can be taken down with that, because if you have heavy pressure with the hands, your hands aren't down here to defend the takedown, especially when you are at a reach disadvantage. You've got to really commit to those strikes to be able to get across that reach. And if Blanchfield decides to duck under one of them strikes and get a takedown in, it's there for the taking. Something that could also, though, benefit on the McCann side, she doesn't get rattled in a firefight, so if this fight does end up striking, Blanchfield isn't able to get the takedowns. McCann's not awful on the takedown defense, so there is that. If this fight does end up into a firefight, McCann doesn't get rattled. And as we saw in her last fight where she was starting to get hit, I believe it was her last fight, she was starting to get hit a little bit. She still throws that spinning elbow like it's no big deal and flattens another one. She had to follow that one up a little bit, but either way, it was still the spinning elbow. The one before that was the one she didn't have to follow up whatsoever, because that spinning elbow just put it out for good. But anyway, she doesn't really get rattled by strikes. She's able to maintain composure and strike back, and I do think that's really important. So if this fight does stay in the striking range, even though Blanchfield has the reach advantage, I do think McCann is the better striker overall for this kind of a matchup because of the counter shots where Blanchfield can be hit. However, if Blanchfield gets this to the mat, she is going to have a massive advantage. And in this matchup, I am going to pick Blanchfield, but I won't place a bet on this one because the odds are way too wide. I do not blame somebody for picking McCann. If you are going to pick McCann, I do think by knockout is a pretty solid pick. I don't see her submitting Erin Blanchfield. I guess a club and sub's possible, but not likely. I don't see her getting the decision because I do think that if this goes to decision, it means that Blanchfield's able to work her grappling in. Because otherwise, if you're going to stand there and trade with Molly McCann's going to hurt you. So I do think Blanchfield is going to get the win if it goes to decision. So the only way I see that McCann winning really in this matchup is by knockout, and I don't think it's a far shot to say that. So for me, I'm taking Blanchfield, but I do see the knockout upside on McCann. So if you're throwing something on that one, I don't blame you at all. But I'm picking Blanchfield. I'm just going to sit back on this one. It's another one of them fights. I'm going to put my feet up on the coffee table. I'm going to crack open a couple of root beers. I'm going to be like 4 to 6 root beers deep by this point because we're getting wild at UFC 281. Anyway, picking Erin Blanchfield. Let me know what you guys think. I'm loving this fight. We'll go to the next one. The return of Dominick Reyes. He's coming in 2-3 in his last 5 fights, stepping in to take on Ryan Spann, who is 3-2 in his last 5. Now for Dominick Reyes, this is a good matchup because his last 3 losses came to John Jones, Jan Blachowicz, and Yuri Prochazka. 3 of the guys that are at the top of the division, top level guys, all either current or former champions at light heavyweight. For Ryan Spann, 3-2 in his last 5, mostly because of the inconsistency that he has. Sometimes he shows up to fight, sometimes he shows up to get beat. So you'll see that in Ryan Spann's fights. It's just the way that he fights, the way he is. He's even all the way back to his like LFA times or whatever. He was the same way, kind of just inconsistent. So there's that. But for Dominick Reyes, this will give us a really good opportunity to see where he is in his career, whether or not those losses have kind of just cashed him out, whether he's done, or if Dominick Reyes just lost to some of the top guys and he's back and he's ready to reclimb that ladder and really get things figured out. So In this matchup, we do have a massive human being on the side of Ryan Spann. He's 6'5" with an 81.5-inch reach. That is huge. On the other hand, 6'4" with a 77-inch reach for Reyes. He's also not a small guy, but Ryan Spann's just a giant of a human being. So he does have the size advantage in this matchup. He's also a very powerful giant, so there's that. He used to fight at 185, which is crazy to me. For Dominick Reyes, he's going to look smaller here, but he's not a small guy by any means. In this matchup, something I want to point out about Dominick Reyes specifically is he's just kind of well-rounded in his offense and defense. He's just a well-rounded fighter, which usually is a bad thing because if you're well-rounded, it usually means that you're not very good at anything specifically. But sometimes being a well-rounded fighter is a good thing. As I pointed out in the Neil Magny pick last week in that video, if you want to go back and check the tape to make sure I made that pick, I sure did. You can check it. It's on the channel. Neil Magny is a well-rounded fighter that I thought was going to win in that matchup due to the fact that being well-rounded isn't always bad. Usually it does mean you're lacking in being good at one specific thing, but Dominick Reyes, it's similar to Neil Magny, not quite to the level of Neil Magny, the guy's a vet, but for Dominick Reyes, he's good in the striking, good in the wrestling. He pretty much is just good all around. But he doesn't have anything that just really sets him out as, oh, that's what you know Dominick Reyes for. I guess the straight shots in his striking, that big heavy 1-2. But I mean, it's a 1-2. I mean, it's a 1-2. Everybody has a 1-2, okay? So anyway, we got Dominick Reyes here. He's pretty good at everything. I do like that about him in this matchup because he is fighting a guy who's just a glass cannon on the other side. I don't mean just a glass cannon as he's nothing else, but on offensively, this is what he is. Power, explosiveness, throws big shots, can rip your head off in a choke. But he doesn't like getting hit, does not respond well to pressure, as I put here. He does not respond well to pressure. Dominick Reyes, from his previous fights, from what we've seen, he can pressure you, and he does that a lot, walks you down with those 1-2s like I talked about, mixes in the wrestling when need be. For Ryan Spann, he doesn't respond well to that. But if he hits you, he's going to put you out or at least hurt you. If he gets a hold of your head, he's going to try and pull the thing off your body. So you have that. So Ryan Spann, good on offense, fragile. Okay, he's the definition of a glass cannon by my opinion. He can grapple. He can strike. He's just not very durable from where I'm at. And mentally, not responding well to pressure, he'll let you back him up, and he kind of panics just a little bit. Not to the sense that he's just cowering in the corner, but he does panic a little bit. He does get a little rattled by that pressure. And for Dominick Reyes, that's a good thing for him. The problems we have, though, where is he at mentally after those last couple of knockout losses? Where's his mindset? Because it seems that he's been just a little bit off since the Jon Jones loss. And, watching that fight live, I remember being really torn about the decision and not knowing what I thought, because it was a close fight. And I'm not going to dwell on that fight here, but I kind of saw the Jon Jones win in the moment. So at the time, I thought Jon Jones had just barely edged it. I watched it back, and then I was like, I don't know about that. Maybe Reyes did get that one. But either way, what's done is done. You can't change it now. Dominick Reyes had a really close fight with Jon Jones, and ever since then, he has had a rough spot, Lost to Blachowicz, like I mentioned. Blachowicz looked like a madman in that fight, landing those body kicks that bruised up Dominick Reyes just immediately. It was gnarly. Okay, Blachowicz looked really, really good in that fight. No shame in that because Blachowicz went on to be the champion. Then gets knocked out by Yuri Prochazka. Now, something I want to point out. I had Dominick Reyes kind of a little bit up in that fight at that point. I thought Dominick Reyes was winning that fight until that elbow just turned his lights out, put him in the shadow realm, if you will. Dominick Reyes went down like a sack of potatoes. So in that matchup, he did show that he still had it then. But where's his mental state at now after that big knockout loss to Yuri Prochazka? Where's his chin at? That a knockout like that can change your chin for the rest of your career because he got put out so stinking hard. Let's put it that way. For me, I don't know. These are completely unanswered questions, and there's no amount of research can answer that question because the only thing that is going to answer that question is how he responds in this matchup if he gets hit by Ryan Spann. Does he crumble mentally? Does he crumble physically? That's what we don't know. But skill for skill, I like Dominick Reyes over Ryan Spann a whole lot. Because skill for skill, I think he has Ryan Spann beat just about everywhere. But the problem is where these are. I'm going to pick Dominick Reyes. He's a pretty sizable favorite. I think it's like 220 or so, minus 220 or so. I'm pretty confident in Dominick Reyes, but because of those, I mean, I wouldn't put him as a massive parlay piece on everything. But I don't mind a play on Dominick Reyes here. I like Dominick Reyes. Throw him in a parlay with somebody you're more confident in. For me, he should get the win if we're going skill for skill. But like I said, we don't know these things, and we won't find that out until this fight. So if you really like Ryan Spann, I don't blame you. The glass cannon, Ryan Spann can drop a guy. You saw him darn near rip off Kutialaba's head or whatever. Not really. I'm exaggerating here, but you know what I mean. So Ryan Spann's got a path to victory. It's not out of the question, but I'm taking Dominick Reyes. I think he's going to come back. I think he's had enough time. He probably worked with a mental coach or what are they called? Sports psychologist or whatever. Got his mind right. I think he's ready to come back and actually make a run towards the top again. Not that he's good. I don't think he's going to be the same Dominick Reyes that darn near beat John Jones, but I do think he's still got some good years left in him. And I think this is going to be the first step in that path back. So for me, Dominick Reyes is the pick. Let's move to the next one. Should be one of the more exciting fights in the card. We have Brad Riddel taking on Renato Moicano. Both guys 3-2 in their last 5 fights. Both guys known for having exciting fights, which we like to see. Obviously, we like to see exciting fights. These guys bring it. So this could easily be one of the fight of the nights or the fight of the night, if you ask me. But we do have a discrepancy in height here. We have a 5'11" Renato Moicano against a 5'7" Brad Riddel. But something I also wanted to point out, there's only a half-inch reach advantage on the Moicano side. Brad Riddel must just have big shoulders. I don't know. But either way, I mean, because 5'7" does not translate to 71.5. So he's definitely got a longer wingspan than he is tall. So let's put it that way. I believe that's 67 inches. So you have that to look at there. Anyway, so for Brad Riddel and Renato Moicano, both guys love an exciting fight. Or if they don't love it, they sure have a bad way of showing it because they both get into exciting fights quite a bit. The kickboxing is very high level for Brad Riddel. He mixes the strikes up, whether he's going high, middle, or low, legs, body, head, doesn't matter. He'll mix it up well and keep you guessing on where the strikes are coming from. He can put some power in those shots too. It's not like he just is only a volume, but he does have good volume in his strikes. It's something that I like to see out of a guy like Brad Riddel. On the other side, Moicano's not a bad striker himself. We know him more for his high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but his grappling does set up the striking because the threat of that grappling, because it's very good he's good on the mat, it sets up the striking because the threat of the takedown is something that you want to avoid. So by being worried about the takedown, the striking then opens up, makes a guy who's good at striking look really good at striking, or makes a guy who's really good at striking look excellent at striking. It just kind of bumps you up a notch. When the threat of that takedown is there, that striking looks better. So we have Moicano, who is a good striker in his own right. He can use his cardio to also work in the striking advantage for him because the guy doesn't really get tired. We saw it in the RDA fight. We also saw he's got a good chin in the RDA fight, but Moicano, he just kept coming. Cardio, he did not gas out whatsoever. I mean, maybe a little bit at the end, but I mean, come on, it was 5 rounds of a grueling pace. But the guy showed really good cardio and was able to hang in there against RDA. Something that does worry me about that fight for Moicano. What does that take away from a guy who goes through a war like that? Because that takes years off your career. Everybody was saying at the end of the fight, oh, that took years off his career. Fight should have been stopped, should have thrown in the towel, yada, 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 whatever. Now we've forgotten about that. I don't think so. Moicano, that probably took a bit out of his career, and how much is that going to affect him moving forward and in this fight with Brad Riddel? But anyway, something else I want to put out is the takedowns from Moicano. Yes, he can do range takedowns. He doesn't do them as often, though. Where his takedowns come from, it's the body locks and the trips. That's how he gets the fight to the mat. So he wants to get into that clinch and use that as his way to get the fight to the mat. Brad Riddel, on the other hand, he doesn't mind a takedown of his own. He does have some decent wrestling, but he also has some decent takedown defense. I don't think he's going to let Moicano get to those body locks or trips without putting some pain on the Moicano end. So Brad Riddell fights well in close as well as at range. His striking is good wherever. So for that, I think if Moicano is going to be able to go for a body lock, he's going to have to eat some shots from a guy like Riddell, and that's not something you want. Riddell was able to beat Drew Dober, and that is something that I find interesting for this particular matchup because Moicano's a guy that can keep coming forward. What is Drew Dober? A guy that keeps coming forward. A guy that just can take a shot no matter what you put on him. He can keep coming forward. So for Riddell, I do like that victory. He did use some wrestling in that matchup to obviously win that match, to win that fight. So wrestling might not be his best path to victory here against Moicano, but I do think that Riddell does have a solid path to victory, and he is currently an underdog. Right now, I'm super slightly leaning towards the Riddell side for the striking advantage that he has and his ability to be able to, stop a takedown or make Moicano pay for coming in. And I'm also just kind of concerned as where is Moicano after that RDA fight? How is he going to look coming back in this matchup against Brad Riddell, who can put the pain on you with the striking? His striking is very high level. Moicano probably is the more well-rounded fighter and probably the better skill for skill overall. But I think that this matchup, stylistically, Moicano, in his losses, has lost two guys that can outstrike him. And I do think Riddell is a guy who can outstrike him. So I'm going to take Riddell for now. If the odds flip at some point, maybe you see me hop on the other side. But right now, I'm leaning Riddell. It's a close fight. I'm not mega confident in this one. But if you give me him as an underdog, a guy who is at very high level striking, he is that in that kickboxing that he has against a guy who, like Moicano, like I said, his losses do come to the higher level strikers, which Brad Riddell is. So I'll take Riddell. Let me know what you guys think. Let's go to the next fight. This breakdown is going to be a tough one here because we have Dan Hooker committed 1-4 in his last 5 fights, which is what makes me nervous, against Claudio Puelles coming in 5-0 in his last 5 fights. So in this fight here, Puelles, he is 5'10" with a 72-inch reach against the 6 foot with a 75.5-inch reach Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker does have the size advantage there. I have no idea how that guy made featherweight being 6 foot, but he did. So there you go. This is his first fight back at lightweight after fighting at featherweight previously in a short one-off fight. So for this matchup here, here's what I'm going to just get this out there right now. What really bothers me is I don't know what stage of the career Dan Hooker is in. Yes, his losses are, well, he's had a lot of them, but they're to the highest level fighters. The guy isn't losing to just bums. So they're giving him a step down in competition here, but not a big step down. I do think Claudio Puelles is a very talented fighter, and we're going to see that when I break down his side of the fight. But for me, Dan Hooker is just a big unknown. So I'm going to tell you guys ahead of time, I don't recommend placing a bet on this. And I've seen a lot of people in the MMA community, especially on MMA Twitter, making their picks for Dan Hooker and placing bets on him already. And you know what? First off, you can probably get him at a better price. But second of all, I can't place a bet on this fight either way, because if Dan the Hangman Hooker shows up and fights like we know he can, dude's going to probably win the fight. Because he's a bad dude when that Hangman shows up. The same guy that went the distance against Dustin Poirier. When that Dan Hooker shows up, the guy's got a chance. And in fact, he's probably going to win the fight. However, if Dan Hooker really is towards the end of his career, as far as his UFC career anyway, and he's on that downward slope because of the damage he's taken over his career, things aren't looking good for him. If that's actually the case, then Claudio Puelles is going to rip him apart, because that dude is nasty on the ground, and he'll probably be able to get it there if that's the Dan Hooker that we see. So let's break this down a little bit. I'm going to start on the Puelles side. The dude is very good on the mat. First off, he's on a 2 knee bar win streak. In fact, in his last 5 fights, 3 of his wins are by knee bar. That is nasty. Knee bars are one of the worst submission holes to get caught in. I don't know if you've ever been caught in a knee bar. If you have, it is scary. You tap out usually before they break your knee. But guess what? Sometimes they just snap that dang leg in 2, and you are out of luck. Usually it doesn't break. Usually it dislocates. Either way, it's not a good feeling. You're going to mess up those ligaments. It's not fun. So there's that. He does have decent takedowns as well. The striking does leave a lot to be desired, but his kicks are all right. He has some pretty solid kicks. Not so much with the boxing, but if this fight gets to the ground, Puelles is probably going to take a leg home with him because, my goodness, Dan Hooker, he's a very talented striker. His grappling is good, but he's definitely a striker. And for a guy like Claudio Puelles, who's ripping people's knees out left and right, this fight is all his on the ground. So on the Hooker side, though, his striking, like I said, he's a very good striker. He does train with a lot of strikers. He comes from New Zealand, where striking is what you get there. You get a lot more strikers that come out of New Zealand than you get grapplers. Now, obviously, they can grapple. This is MMA, but that's where the bread gets buttered. It is in the striking department, and Dan Hooker is no different in that sense. But he can grapple offensively in his own right. He can mix in his own takedowns. I don't think he should in this fight, but he can do it, and I'm going to put it up there just because of that. And I needed a few more things on the Dan Hooker side, because realistically, the thing that we need to know is just this one right here. What stage of the career is Dan Hooker? If we got the real Hangman coming out, we're all right. Otherwise, like I said, he ain't going to do it. The fear of the takedown. I wrote this up here. In the Michael Chandler-Dan Hooker fight, it was the fear of the takedown that caused Dan Hooker to get knocked out in the way that he did. Michael Chandler comes forward feigning the level change. He's doing this, setting up that overhand. Well, guess what? Dan Hooker doesn't want to get taken down by a guy like Michael Chandler. Why is that? Because Michael Chandler is a very good grappler. So because he was so worried about the takedown, he was hittable on the feet. And guess what? Michael Chandler hits like a freight train because the guy's nothing but a big wad of muscle. So what happened was Dan Hooker, fear of the takedown, well, he didn't get taken down, but he concentrated too much of his defense on something that he was worried about, which caused him to lack in the defensive department of the striking, and that's where he got cracked. Puelles, he does have decent takedowns. He's not on the level of Michael Chandler in the takedowns. His jiu-jitsu is better, but his takedowns, they're not that level. But because he does have decent takedowns, if he has watched that Michael Chandler fight, he will know that he can feign the takedown enough. Dan Hooker's going to be worried about that, and he can mix in some of his own strikes and probably have success on the feet. I don't think it's going to be a one-shot KO like it was for Michael Chandler, but he will be able to have some success on the feet if he does put the fear of the takedown into Dan Hooker. It is there. It is possible, because I wouldn't want to go to the ground with Claudio Puelles. The guy will probably break my leg. So there we go. In this matchup, like I said, I'm not going to pick a bet here. I'm going to pick Dan Hooker simply because I want Dan Hooker to win, because I don't want to see him lose again, okay? That's all it is. I don't know. Claudio Puelles probably should win this fight. He's the up-and-coming guy, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. The guy is a savage. But I'm going to pick Dan Hooker because I want the old Hangman to show up. But if he doesn't show up, you can come back to the comments and tell me I'm a big dummy for picking Dan Hooker and when he should have lost. And yeah, I will probably agree with you because I realize he probably should lose this fight. But in the off chance that the old Dan Hooker shows up, I'm rooting for it. I'm taking him. Not confident at all. So let's move on to the next fight. I've spent too much time breaking down a pick that I'm not confident in whatsoever, but we've got more to cover. You heard my take on the previous fight. You're about to get a very similar one. We've got Frankie Edgar coming in 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Chris Gutierrez, on the other hand, is 4-0-1. That one is a draw. Usually I put a D there, forgot. Either way, Chris Gutierrez, 4 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw in his last 5 fights. This matchup is very similar in the sense that Frankie Edgar is in the Dan Hooker situation here, where, like, yeah, the Frankie Edgar of old, that in his prime, could he beat Chris Gutierrez? Yep, probably. I mean, he's a high-level wrestler. He's got some of the better MMA wrestling because he's able to mix those takedowns in with such a high pace and cardio that he could beat most guys at a lot of different divisions. I mean, he's got wins at 155, 145, 135. That's where he's taking this fight, at 135. So for Frankie Edgar, yeah, a prime Frankie Edgar can beat a lot of top-level UFC fighters, even today. But Frankie Edgar, wow, why is that messing me up today? He is 41 years old, and that is not what you want going into an MMA fight, especially in the bantamweight division. And he's fighting a 31-year-old Chris Gutierrez. There's a stat that floats around somewhere about the 10-year age gap, where the 10-year younger or more fighter wins at like a ridiculous percentage of the time. Well, like, guess what? Because Father Time is undefeated, and this is one of those matchups where you're probably going to see a similar outcome. Chris Gutierrez, I'm going to give away my pick now. I do think Chris Gutierrez is going to get the win, but this gives me pause. Let me break down both guys before I go any further in that. Chris Gutierrez being 5'9" does give him a bit of a height advantage over the 5'6" Frankie Edgar. The reach is pretty darn close. Either way, the height is there. High level wrestling on the Frankie Edgar side. Also, Chris Gutierrez, he can be wrestled. He's been taken down. We saw it in the first round of the Cody Durden fight when Cody Durden stepped in on short notice, took that fight, and brought it to Chris Gutierrez. 10-8'd him in the first round with just impressive wrestling. But he also, the so-so takedown defense, he was able to come back against Cody Durden after he got past that first round when Cody Durden was gassed. Had he not been gassed because it was a short notice fight, yeah, maybe that fight turns out differently and we'd see a 1 in the loss column there, but he can be wrestled, and that's what I'm getting at. So he can be wrestled. The takedown defense it's shoddy. And if anybody's going to take you down, Frankie Edgar is a tough guy to fight against if you're not going to be good with the takedown defense. So Frankie Edgar, good there. Has good movement. Doesn't get hit a lot, but when he does, lately it's been lights out. He's a guy who used to be able to walk through some punches, no big deal, but lately he's been getting knocked out with some of the most brutal knockouts some of the more brutal knockouts you'd see in a guy's career, and he's had them back to back, okay? It's not looked good. The Sandhagen knockout with that knee, yeah, that was rough to watch. So, as a guy who likes Frankie Edgar generally, yeah, that sucked to see. But, it is what it is. It's MMA. It's a brutal sport. It's what happens. You don't want to see that for Frankie Edgar going into a fight against a guy like Chris Gutierrez, who maybe doesn't have as much power in his shots as, say, like a Marlon Vera or a Corey Sandhagen. But he's not a bad striker. The guy's got good striking, and he can drop a guy. He's done it plenty of times in those last 4 wins that he's got up there. So he can drop someone. Now, here's the kicker, if you will. This is going to be funny in a second. Hold on. Leg kicks. Chris Gutierrez is a guy that you do not want to eat leg kicks from. And guess who doesn't do anything but eat leg kicks? It's Frankie Edgar. He doesn't check kicks. He'll let you kick him in the leg because he thinks he's going to be able to outpace you. At least that's my assumption, is he'll walk through the kicks, try to outpace you. Chris Gutierrez kicks that leg hard, and he will drop you with it. And he can actually get a leg kick finish, as I do believe he does have on his record as well. So for Chris Gutierrez, I do think this is a matchup where he does have the tools to win. But on the same side, he does lack the skills to stop Frankie Edgar from implementing his game plan of the wrestling. So if Edgar is going to win a fight and go out on a high notice, this is a decent matchup because he is going against Chris Gutierrez, who can be wrestled. However, because even let me take a step back here. Even in the Dana Bakary fight, Chris Gutierrez was taken down before he ended up putting the hurt on Bakary. So for me, I do think this is a winnable fight for Edgar. This isn't a fairy tale. I'm not going to get all excited thinking Edgar's going to win and be excited and place a bunch of money on the underdog here. He's like plus 180 last I saw. Chris Gutierrez should get the win. I'm leaving this fight off my card. I don't want to bet on Chris Gutierrez because I don't want to have to bet against Frankie Edgar in this matchup because I'm going to be rooting for Frankie Edgar regardless of where I place a bet. And I like Chris Gutierrez. I really do. I enjoy watching his fights. He's a fun guy. Some of the stuff he says cracks me up. He's pretty funny in his interviews. So I do like Chris Gutierrez. But how do you root against Frankie Edgar? It's hard. He's a likable guy. So for me, I don't want to place a bet on this fight. I think Chris Gutierrez is going to win. I'm just going to sit back. We're getting crazy on the root beers tonight. We're going to kick the feet up on the coffee table some more. We're just chilling. Frankie Edgar got a good shot, but I just don't see it. How often does a guy get to retire on top? He's already said this is a retirement fight. Yeah, Chris Gutierrez is the pick. Let me know what you guys think. I know a lot of people are picking Frankie Edgar. I don't blame you. I just think you're counting too much on that wrestling. And against a guy like Gutierrez, who is still young and hungry. You're young-ish. He's 31. But he's still younger and hungrier. Yeah, I don't know that that's there. So let me know. We got a few fights left, some really exciting ones. So let's get into those and stop dwelling on the old guys retiring. Next up, we have the odds-on favorite for fight of the night on everybody's slate. I have Michael Chandler coming in 3-2 in his last 5 fights. On the other side, Dustin Poirier 3-2 in his last 5 fights. This matchup is interesting because everybody expects it to be the fight of the night for obvious reasons. Both guys know how to put on a show. Both guys are all excitement all of the time, oftentimes to their detriment, more so on one side than the other, and we'll get into that a little bit here. In this matchup, I think one guy is the more... one guy is more likely to try to win the fight rather than have an exciting fight. He just happens to have exciting fights. Whereas the other guy, he just wants to have an exciting fight, and winning is secondary, at least at this point in their career. So for this fight, we'll get into who it is in a moment. For this matchup here, Dustin Poirier, he has really good boxing, and offensively and defensively. He doesn't get hit a lot with the hands. He's able to come back with his own striking, and it looks good. For Poirier, there are very few boxers in the UFC or people with a boxing style that can match up with Dustin Poirier. He is solid in the boxing department. He does have a good chin if he does get connected on. If somebody does land on him, someone like a Michael Chandler who does have knockout power for sure, if he lands on Dustin Poirier, I don't think he puts him out with one shot like he does to some of the other guys. Michael Chandler dropped and completely KO'd Dan Hooker. Wow, don't know why that spaced for a second, but Dan Hooker, he dropped him and knocked him out no problem in that matchup. Also, he was able to flatten, although he was able to bounce back, but he flattened for a brief moment Charles Oliveira in their matchup as well. So he does have some seriously strong power, and guys like Charles Oliveira can eat a punch. So can Dustin Poirier. I don't think he's going to be able to put him out with that. But if he does get it, if he does land, it's going to hurt. But that defensive boxing on the Poirier side, that's what's going to help him out with that, because that KO power, it doesn't do any good if you can't get past the guard or if you can't land flush. So landing all the power shots that you want against the gloves or catching air, it's not going to do any good. So there is that. Something else that Poirier has that's going to be beneficial for him in this matchup, or at least to have in his back pocket, is that he does have solid defensive grappling. I know that he has been beaten on the ground before, but I mean, these are just some of the highest level grapplers in the world. We're talking about Charles Oliveira. We're talking about Khabib Nurmagomedov, guys like that. Yeah, but he does have some strong grappling defense, and I'm going to say, I definitely stand by what I say there. I know he's lost, like I said, to the highest level grapplers in the division, but either way, I do think it's solid. So I think it holds up. On the Michael Chandler side, this guy is a freak athlete, and that he sometimes lets that carry him too much in a fight. Because if Michael Chandler would stop trying to just have a fun, exciting fight, this guy might be winning more in the UFC. In fact, he could have been champion. And hear me out on this. He beat Charles Oliveira in that first round, okay? You know that. I know that. It happened. Here's the thing. He comes out in the second round, doesn't go to what was winning for him. Yes, he did drop Charles Oliveira with the hands, but where did that fight end? It was on the mat with Michael Chandler laying down some volume, laying down some ground and pound, and doing some good damage on Charles Oliveira. What does he do when he comes back out? Oh, we're going to strike again. I'm going to try and knock you down. Why? Charles Oliveira does not have very good takedown defense, because normally he does not care. Usually he just wants to use his jiu-jitsu on you because he's good with it. You have a high-level wrestling background from Mizzou. That's where he wrestled. I had to think about that for a second. From Mizzou, Missouri. Michael Chandler has good wrestling. Why not just shoot a takedown on Charles Oliveira, who you've just beat pretty good in that previous round, and not risk getting caught on the feet because he's a deadly striker and you know he is? Well, what does he do? He wants to trade with him and he gets knocked out. Michael Chandler should have won that fight, but his fight IQ is questionable because and I don't even know that his fight IQ is bad. I think he just wants to have an exciting fight and doesn't care if he loses, I guess. I don't know. His striking defense is also poor, and I also don't know if he actually has bad striking defense or if he just wants to have an exciting fight and thinks getting hit's going to be good for that. I don't know. I can't trust Michael Chandler in any bets because of that. I'm not going to bet on this fight. I like Michael Chandler because he puts on exciting fights, so I like him for the same reasons I don't want to bet on him. He is very enticing as the underdog in this matchup at like plus 180 because he does have a lot of paths to victory. And if he decides to go out there and use his wrestling to take down and control Dustin Poirier, sure, he has defensive grappling, but getting taken down, it's still a guy like Chandler who is a freak athlete, powerful, strong. He can just ground and pound out a guy like Dustin Poirier if he uses that wrestling to his fullest. But I don't see him trying to do that. I see him go out there and trying to get in a war on the feet with a guy like Dustin Poirier. So for me, I think Dustin Poirier is probably going to win because I'm not counting on Michael Chandler to make the right decisions. However, if Michael Chandler goes out there and makes the right decisions, he has a clear path to victory here. I just don't think that he will. So I'm going to pick Dustin Poirier. I'm not confident in it enough to place a bet on Dustin Poirier as the favorite. If the odds were flipped, I would consider it, but I'm also not confident in enough in Michael Chandler that I can place a bet on him as the underdog, knowing that he also knows that he's probably not getting cut from the UFC if he loses this fight, and he's going to get paid pretty well either way. So for Michael Chandler, unless he goes out there and uses all of the tools in his arsenal, I don't see him beating Dustin Poirier, and I don't have faith that Michael Chandler will use all the tools in his arsenal because, like I said, he wants to get into a war. Same thing with Justin Gaethje. He just went out there, he was like, we're going to have a great, exciting fight. You don't want that. You don't want that. I just want to shake him and say, why? Why? You've got a family, dude. Stop taking shots to the face for no reason. Anyway, yeah, the pick's Dustin Poirier. Let me know what you guys think. If you like Michael Chandler in this fight, I don't blame you. But let me know why in the comments. I would love to hear it. Let's move on to the next fight. We've got a couple of really big title fights coming up. We'll see you there. Before we get into the co-main event of the evening, if you have enjoyed this video so far, hit like for me. I'd really appreciate it. If this is your first time on the channel and you'd like to see more breakdowns like this in the future for UFC events, for Dana White's Contender Series, for Bellator, consider subscribing so you can see all of the fight predictions and preview videos as they come out from this channel. And also, maybe share this with some of your friends because if you like this, your friends who also like MMA would probably also enjoy this. But let's get into the fight. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Let's go. We have Carla Esparza, the champion, coming in 5-0 in her last 5 fights against Weili Zhang, or Zhang Weili, I believe is how you're supposed to say it. 3-2 in her last 5 fights. Those 2 losses are to Rose Namajunas. One was a knockout with a head kick. The other was a very close decision where I wasn't sure who won that one. But either way, Namajunas got the nod. So 3-2 in her last 5 for Zhang. In this matchup, we have a really interesting one because the champion is actually a big underdog here. And I think that's because she's often overlooked. I put that here. The reason I think that, her style is easy to kind of look past as, oh, she's just a wrestler or whatever. But her wrestling is very good. She's a very high-level wrestler, and she's able to use that to win minutes in fights. I've just kind of covered everything on her side, but that's what she does well. She can strike. It's improving as she goes. It's clearly not what she's good at, but that wrestling, that's where it's at for her. If she can get Zhang to the ground, if she can get her to the ground and implement her game, she's going to win minutes in this fight, same as she has done in most of her fights, and the same that she's done against other powerful strikers. So, for me, I think that Carla Esparza does have a real shot in this, especially with the way that the odds are, but here's the Zhang Weili side. For Weili, she does have some good striking. She's powerful and strong in that, not only the striking, but in grappling as well. She's a powerful and strong individual. Everybody's talking about the video of her picking up Francis Ngannou. Yeah, she's a beast, dude. She's strong as heck. Strong like ox, if you will. So, anyway, Zhang Weili, she does have pretty good striking, and we saw that in the Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight. I probably butchered her last name. You just say it really fast, people forget that. But either way, we saw it there. She was able to strike with someone who is a very, very high-level kickboxer, and she even got the knockout in that fight with the spinning back fist. So, for me, Weili, she has a real good path to victory here just by being the more athletic, more powerful, and having the better striking over someone like Carla Esparza, who her path to victory is very clear. It's the wrestling offensively. On the other side, Weili's got options. She can wrestle offensively on her own. And she gets on top of Esparza. Esparza obviously is a good wrestler. She's better on top than she is from her back. That's not really where a wrestler wants to be at any point. So if Weili gets the takedown herself, I can see her doing really well with the ground and pound there. She's also going to be the better striker in this matchup. But here's the thing. The reason, I'm going to just give away my pick here. I'm picking Weili because of this. And I even put a star there because it's important. She improves between every fight, even at this point in her career. She's been the champion before, but she keeps improving between the fights. So, first Namajunas fight. She gets head kicked, knocked out, game over. Second Namajunas fight. Okay, we don't see a quick head kick knockout. Guess what? We get to see this fight go back and forth. I had a bet on Namajunas in that matchup, and I still thought Weili probably edged that one out when they were reading the scorecards. It wasn't a total robbery. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna say it was a robbery, but I initially in watching it thought Weili won that fight, and I was betting on the other side because of the head kick knockout in the first fight. It cashed. It was cool. Whatever. I'll take it. But at the same time, I thought Weili won that fight. That's a drastic improvement from getting knocked out by put down with a head kick with, well placed. It was a good kick, don't get me wrong, to then going on to having a very close decision loss where a lot of people are saying that you probably won. So that's impressive. Another example, we have another one to go off of. Shake Shack fight. See what I did there? So the first time, split decision, really close fight. I think the donut on Joanna's head that was left from the striking, that is the reason that I think Weili got the nod in that one, because technically Joanna actually outstruck her in that fight. It was just the more damaging strikes happened to be on the Weili Zhang side. So there's that. In the second matchup between the two of them, obviously Joanna had been off for a little while, so there is that to take into account. But Weili comes in and looks really good in that matchup. Yeah, Joanna had a couple of moments, but Weili made it look a lot easier that time around and obviously got the knockout win, dropped her hard with that back fist. So for Zhang, she's really been able to improve pretty drastically in between each of her fights, and she finds the place that she needs to go to get the training and find the people that she needs to be around to get the training she needs to win fights. For me, I think that is the X factor here, and that's why I'm taking Weili. I think she's a pretty safe bet. Yes, there's a world where Esparza gets the takedown and holds her down and wins a lot of minutes, but I comfortably can say I do pick Weili in this matchup, and I do think that she's going to be the champion and going to be very hard to get that belt from. So that's the pick. Let's move on to the main event. It's going to be a couple of things really quick. If you haven't yet checked out my interview with Brandon Beast Mode Meyer, where we give an early look at this fight, check it out. He also talks about, hypes up his BKFC debut that he's having on November 18th in Omaha, Nebraska at BKFC 33. Brandon Beast Mode Meyer and I sat down, broke down this just a little bit, and talked about his fight just a little bit, a little touch of both. So if you haven't checked it out, it'll be at the end screen of this video. Also, one more quick thing. Let me know in the comments what you want me to do for a video during the off week that we're going to have for no UFC or no Bellator. Let me know if you want me to interview another fighter. Let me know if you want me to give you my favorite 5 fighters or whatever in the UFC, or whatever. Maybe my favorite fighters outside of the UFC. Whatever you like, let me know. I want to know what it is. That way I can make a video that you guys want to see. Anyway, on to the main event of the evening. I know that's what you're here for. We have Israel Adesanya taking on Alex Pereira. Pereira? I'm not very good with the Brazilian names. Bear with me. Pereira, I think is how you say it. Pereira coming in 5-0 in his last 5 fights. 4-1 for Adesanya. That one loss is up at light heavyweight, where he lost to Jan Blachowicz in a matchup where I was probably the only guy that I know of that was picking Blachowicz, simply because the guy's a behemoth, and I think both guys are elite fighters. And if skills are equal, size is a thing. Size is a big issue. That may come into play here. Both guys are listed as the same height and reach, but Pereira is a lot bigger human than Adesanya, so that is an issue that Adesanya is going to have to deal with in this matchup. But for both of these guys, as you see, they're both world-class kickboxers. There are very few kickboxers on the planet that are going to be better than either of these two guys, and I say that with full confidence because both guys have been world champions. Both guys have amazing striking. Here's the difference, though. What we're going to see here, we're going to see forward pressure versus elusiveness. We're going to see KO power versus minute winning. And we're also going to see that kind of pinpoint accuracy that you see out of Israel Adesanya. On the other hand, we're going to see a guy who kind of has rented some space in Adesanya's head, as Brandon Meyer said in the interview. He's won twice in kickboxing against Israel Adesanya, one of which was by knockout, the other was by a decision. That decision was very close. I watched it. I thought Adesanya won. The judges did not. That's how it works. But either way, on paper, like I said in an earlier fight, it doesn't matter what the judges think. If it's on paper and that's what it is, there's no change in it. That's just the way that it is. So anyway, that's what happens. In the history books, it says that Alex Pereira won that fight, and that's the way that it's going to be. In this matchup, here's what I see. And something I want to point out before I get too far into this. I'm an MMA guy, which is funny because I teach kickboxing fitness as a day job. So I teach people kickboxing as a day job, and I'm an MMA guy. So for me, Adesanya is the MMA guy, and he's fighting a kickboxer. It wasn't even that long ago that this guy was still a glory world champion, that was still fighting his kickboxing in his kickboxing matches, not MMA. He did have a couple of MMA fights way back, but it was very recently that he went into MMA as his now career and has set aside the kickboxing for now, at least. I don't want to see a guy come in from kickboxing and just beat the world champion in MMA. And we've seen it too many times recently, dang it, where retired MMA guys are going and fighting these YouTube celebrities in boxing and getting beat, okay? That's MMA guys going to another sport and losing. This is a guy from kickboxing coming to another sport to fight the MMA guy. This is as if a boxer came into MMA in the reverse of what we've been seeing. Obviously, kickboxing translates a little bit better to MMA than pure boxing does. But this is that exact scenario where we have someone coming from another sport into MMA. Yes, he's had some practice in there, but not that much. He's 6-1 in his MMA career, something like that. Adesanya has been in MMA for a while now. He has 20 some odd wins or whatever and only one loss. Adesanya is an MMA guy. He's an MMA fighter at this point. Pereira, he's still a kickboxer in MMA. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see Adesanya lose. And I'm not even an Adesanya fan. I just don't want to see the MMA guy get beat in MMA by a kickboxer, because that makes the sport that I enjoy look bad, dang it. And we've had it too much with all these boxing matches where MMA guys go over and get beat up by Jake Paul. So that's where I'm at here as far as my want. Let me go ahead and break down now what I think actually happens, okay? Let me know if you agree with me on the wants there, or if you think I'm being stupid. If you think I'm being stupid, let me know. It's fine. I don't care. I've been called stupid before. It's whatever. Anyway, what I think in this matchup actually happens, and I want to kind of go into the kickboxing matches a little bit to kind of get into that. First things first, the decision loss that Adesanya has, I thought he got robbed, but that's just me. In the knockout loss, everybody on the Adesanya side is always saying, oh, well, there was a standing 8 count on Pereira before that and whatever, this, and this. What they forget to mention is that in MMA, you don't get a standing 8 count. If Adesanya rattles Pereira like he did in that kickboxing match, guess what? The referee isn't going to give him time to recover. Adesanya's going to be able to pour it on and get the finish. The reason he didn't get the finish in kickboxing is because you get a standing 8 count and you're allowed to recover and stand there and recover while the other guy just has to sit there and twiddle his thumbs waiting for you. That's not what it's like in MMA. In fact, it's the opposite, where you're encouraged to go in there and keep pounding their face in until the ref pulls you off. So in that matchup, if that something like that happens in this matchup, I think Adesanya gets the win because, well, guess what? He's not going to be able to recover standing there and let the ref give him that little protection, okay? Now, I don't think Pereira's... I don't think he's going to need protection from the referee in order to do that, because clearly he knocked out Adesanya in that fight. And Adesanya did look better up until that knockout, but guess what? The knockout's what matters, and that's how the fight ended. So clearly Pereira can knock out Adesanya. 4-ounce gloves or whatever they are. I mean, geez, it's not unlikely that Adesanya can get put out with those. But here's the thing. Adesanya is the better MMA striker, and I say that because he's been doing it for longer. He's able to be more elusive, use the cage to his advantage, work from an MMA style of striking. He can mix in kicks, punches, just like Pereira can. But instead of thinking of like, okay, these are my kickboxing moves that I'm now doing in an MMA cage, Adesanya now thinks of them as MMA moves. He knows that the grappling is an option, and if he's smart, he will do some grappling. Not like I'm not expecting him to go out there and shoot single and double legs, but I want to see him do some grappling. Clinch up, get a cage push in there a little bit. He's done it before in fights where he's clinched up with people. It's just not. It's not his main. It's not his main style. Obviously, he likes to strike at range, but in a fight like this, a guy that is a world-class kickboxer that is very fresh in the MMA world, you need to be able to use things that are more of the MMA, not of the kickboxing, to be able to get Pereira off of his comfort zone, or out of his comfort zone, excuse me. And I think that Adesanya is going to be able to do that with the clinch. Now, here's the thing. It only takes one. The guy hits like a dang freight train. We saw it when he knocked out Sean Strickland, and Strickland's a guy who usually can eat a punch. Strickland isn't somebody that you see get knocked out very often. In fact, the guy's actually a very talented fighter. He has very few losses on his record. One of them just happens to be a very nasty KO loss to Pereira. So, with that said, Alex Pereira is deadly in this matchup, and if he connects one time with Adesanya with that power shot, particularly that hook that he landed on Strickland, it's over. Adesanya's down, we got a new champion. But I do think Adesanya is able to mix it up. Like I said, he's very elusive. He's a good minute winner. I think he's going to be able to mix it up enough that he's going to be able to keep Pereira off balance enough with his own worry of what's coming next. With mixing in the clinch, the kind of small grappling exchanges, and his own striking, because Adesanya can strike. People are forgetting that. They're thinking, oh yeah, Pereira's the better striker. I don't know that he is. I think Adesanya might be the better striker from a technical standpoint for sure. Obviously, the power is on the Pereira side. I think Adesanya has just as much, if not more, striking credibility as far as skill for skill goes as Pereira. I am not an Israel Adesanya fan. In fact, he annoys the crap out of me. So if you're a big Adesanya fan, awesome. Good on you. I don't hate the guy. He just gets kind of annoying. Anyway, I'm picking him to win this fight, though, because I think he's the MMA fighter fighting in MMA against a kickboxer. He had more winning moments in those kickboxing bouts than Pereira did. The referee saves you in kickboxing, gives you a standing 8 count, lets you recover. That won't happen in MMA. I think the fact that he can mix in the grappling is going to be all that he needs in order to beat Pereira. I could be wrong. I won't be surprised. I'm not going to lay a bunch on Adesanya. Maybe one bet because I do think he wins, but I'm not going big on it. I don't trust it a lot. I don't think Adesanya's. I don't think he's going to just style bend in this fight and just make it look super easy. I don't think so. I think it's going to be a tough fight for him. I think the matchup. I think it's going to be a big stalemate at the beginning, and I think it's going to come out looking boring at first. And the reason why is because both guys know how deadly the other one is in the striking, and neither guy's going to want to make the first move in that first round. There's going to be a long feel-out phase, I do believe. I could be wrong. Pereira could run across the cage and we just get a bomb right out of the gate. I don't think so, though, because, like I said, even though he won those fights, he knows in his head that Adesanya did pretty dang well in those matchups and isn't to be overlooked. And now that he's fighting in Adesanya's realm here, being that of an MMA cage, it's going to be a bit different this time around. He's not going to say that. That'd be stupid. So he's not going to say that he understands the dangers of Adesanya. He's going to say, oh yeah, I'm going to beat him, whatever. Of course he will. Plus he doesn't, his interviews are, you never really know exactly what he's saying because he doesn't speak English and everything's translated. And you always see it in the comments that people say, oh yeah, the translation's not right. So I don't know. Maybe he's saying all sorts of crazy stuff. I have no idea. Either way, point is, I like this fight a lot. I think it's going to be very fun, but I think the first round's going to be pretty boring. I think Adesanya's going to get the win. Let me know what you guys think. I've gone on a lot about this fight. I feel really, as you can tell, I feel a little bit passionate about my MMA guys losing in boxing. And now all the MMA fans are picking the dang kickboxer to come over to MMA and beat the MMA guy who was not that long ago their undefeated champion. So I don't know. Let me know if you share that sentiment as well. And, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you want to see on the off week. We've got another week of fights after this one, but let me know what you want to see on the off week. That's a wrap. I'll see you guys in the next video.